You should all be familiar with solving things like the example shown here. Let's say we have a function f of x equals the square root of x divided by 1 minus the natural log of x. We can easily do this in Excel. So let's say I have x and f of x. I'm going to go x from 1 to 10. Okay, I type in my functions. I take that and I drag it down. Another option, I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to name this the vector x. So you can actually name ranges of cells, not just individual cells. So I'm going to name that x. And you notice that when I highlight that, it's named x. Now, to do the array formulas, you just highlight the resultant, and I'm just going to type in the formula in cell C2 with everything highlighted. Now, be careful, you don't just press enter, you press Control Shift Enter, and we autofill the formula down. And if I click into any one of these, you can see that the formula bar, it's in brackets up here, meaning it was calculated using an array formula. One formula alone controls the calculation. Not a lot of people actually use this for something as basic as this, but nevertheless it's something to keep in mind. A lot of times we want to add vectors or do math on vectors and arrays, and so these vector matrix calculations in Excel can be pretty useful. So for example, if we wanted to add these two vectors, A and B, we can name those two ranges. The first one A, the second one B, and then in column I could highlight cells I2 to I5, type in the formula equals A plus B, then I could do Control Shift Enter, and that will add those two vectors. There are a lot of other types of matrix functions in Excel. We have the mmult, which is matrix multiplication, the minverse, which is the inverse of a matrix, mdeterm, that's the determinant, and transpose. They all require the use of array formulas and then Control Shift Enter. So just as an example, if we have these two matrices that are multiplied together, you're multiplying the first component of a row by the first component of a column. Okay, so for example, that first element is going to be A11 B11 plus A12 B21 plus A13 B31. Whenever you multiply two arrays like this, the inner dimensions must agree. So we can multiply 2 by 3 by 3 by 2, and you end up with the outer dimensions. In general, an n by k times a k by m gives an n by m. The most common application for these array formulas is solving a set of linear equations. So for example, we have three linear equations and three different variables. We have three unknowns and three equations. We can always solve these. There's an easy way to do this. Okay, we can set up an array with the coefficients times the vector x, and then we can set up a coefficient vector. Okay, so a lot of times in math and science, when we're trying to determine the unknowns, we can set this up as arrays and vectors. If you name this coefficient array big A, we have our x vector of our unknowns, and then our b, which is the resultant vector. We can write this as a times x equals b. Now what we're trying to find is x here. Okay, we know a, we know b, we are trying to find x. If you multiply both sides by the inverse of a, any array times its inverse is always equal to the identity matrix, which is essentially just 1. So we end up with x equals the inverse of a times b, and that will give us what the values of x1, x2, and x3 are. Let's go ahead and do this in Excel. I'm going to set up our coefficient array. This is equivalent to A, so I'm going to label that A. I have B, we're going to label that little b. So if we want to find x, it's going to be the matrix inverse, which is minverse of A, times b. So I'm going to just put a label in here for x. I'm doing matrix multiplication. I know that the resultant vector x is going to be a 3 by 1, okay, because I'm multiplying a 3 by 3 by a 3 by 1. I result in a 3 by 1. So I'm going to highlight those three cells. I'm going to type in a formula, equals. Now what I'm doing is I'm multiplying the inverse of A times B. So that function is mmult, matrix multiplication. I'm multiplying now the inverse of A times B. So there's a built-in function for the inverse of A, which is minverse. So minverse of A, comma, B. I'm going to press Control Shift Enter. So these are the solutions for x1, x2, and x3 in our original set of equations. So this is a pretty straightforward way of using matrix multiplication in Excel.